Good afternoon and welcome to the 2020 Annual Dialogue in the Garden. My name is Mattia Bianchi. I'm a professor at the Stockholm School of Economics and the co-founder of the Garden Center for Design and Leadership, together with Roberto Verganti, my colleague, also professor at the Stockholm School of Economics. This painting was made by Peter Dahl, a famous Swedish artist, in 1989 for the 80th anniversary of the school. And what you can see is Swedish business leaders, the Rausings, the Wallenbergs, the Soderbergs, who founded the school and helped develop it. We have professors, Nobel Prize winners like Bertil Ohlin. We even have Karl Marx. And in the middle, we have some kind of hybrid figure with the human body and Uncle Scrooge, as in the head of Uncle Scrooge. And then we have Mercury. Mercury, according to the Romans, was the patron god of merchants, but also of pickpockets and petty thieves. You can see the double face, the double, the two sides of the coin that might represent business and all the dilemmas that come with it. Within SSE, we have the House of Innovation, which does research and training on everything that has to do with innovation, entrepreneurship, and digitalization. And within the House of Innovation, we have the Garden, the Center for Design and Leadership. We see it as an intellectual space where we reflect about design, innovation, and leadership. And to some extent, it's also physical. And we try to replicate that physicality by putting a few green plants around terrace room. That's the best we could do today. Okay, for this conference, we're going to use a platform which is called OPIN. Let's take a look at it. You can ask us questions and interact with us by writing in the chat to the right of the screen. You can also interact with other participants through the chat, but you can also send direct messages or start video calls with other participants. We want to interact with you a lot, so there will be also a number of polls, questions for you that you can answer by activating the poll functionality on top of the chat. Actually, why don't we start immediately doing that? And the question for you is, where are you connecting from this afternoon?
Which is here.
Yes, but you need to please push the click.
Which is there.
Okay, maybe I can't see that. So please answer this question, where you're connecting from today. And that's the power of digital this year, especially that last year we had a conference that was physical. We had a lot of participants, but it was very local, mainly from Stockholm. Actually, we had a lot
of Italians, as always.
A lot of Italians coming from Milan who joined us, but this year we can really tap into the power of digital and have people from all over the world. We had more than 500 sign-ups from all the continents. Let's see who is connected today.
Okay, Amsterdam. This is Södertälje is close. Stockholm, USA. Interesting.
Luleå.
Virgin is Virgin Island, or that's far. Okay. And Virgin Island, I never had any participant for Virgin Island. So, Bristol, UK, fantastic. Frankfurt, Milano, Rome, okay, Berlin, very, very interesting. Tel Aviv, oh wow. So from really all over the world. We just miss Australia, probably because they're sleeping. Portugal, fantastic. So.
Perfect. Good to have you, wherever you're from. Let's continue by mentioning that you can also share your reflection on Twitter, on LinkedIn, using the hashtag Garden Dialogues. And please note that this event is being recorded and will be made available online. Okay? Good. So let's immediately get to the core of the conference, because it's an intense afternoon, a tight schedule. So we want to immediately start discussing content. The program we developed is, I think, very exciting and very relevant. We're going to have a mix of prominent business leaders. We're going to have a couple of academics, unfortunately, but we're going to listen from the key asset of this school, which are our passionate and talented students. They will share some of their research with us. Because really what we want to do with this conference, differently from other conferences, is to open the door of our university and tell you a little bit what we're doing right now on these teams. And last but not least, we're going to have an award ceremony, the award of Michael Treskov, a scholarship, a long-lived and fantastic opportunity for design students fascinated by business opportunities. Let's use Hopin once again, posing you another question, which is which word best describes the reason why you're joining the conference today? Okay.
So, by the way, while they're answering this question, I suppose everyone is interested in design and innovation, but this is a very special moment. So we're very curious to know what drives people and what drives us connected to us tonight and today. By the way, I want to also to thank people who's connected from India. So we didn't get to Australia, but India is still, quite probably quite late in the night. So that's a very warm welcome for those connected from far. So I see there's something is coming here. Curiosity, okay, I like that word, curiosity. It's one of the words that I like most. Human purpose, fantastic. Danny is very, very much in team. Singularity, interesting. So we will try to meet the expectation, which is always very difficult in this period. So AI and innovation, we'll try our best. New ideas, as always, we try to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, how we support innovation in AI and benefit for people.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
You can see this, combination of the human perspective with the technology perspective, and sometimes some frictions, right, between them. How technology can support the actions and decisions of people, but also how they can be in conflict. And then someone is actually connected because of you. Which is makes me a little bit overlooked, but okay. Let's move on.
Because Bianchi is more difficult to spell, so there's a match in between.
Anyway, time for the first presentation, which is actually done by you, Roberto. It's about innovation and design in the age of artificial intelligence. So Roberto Verganti will present contents on this topic. Roberto is professor at Stockholm School of Economics at Politecnico di Milano, a member of the faculty at Harvard Business School, prolific author of books and articles on the intersection between design and business. And Roberto will be supported by two of our best students, graduating in the Master of Business and Management at Stockholm School of Economics, my also former students, so I know them very well, Sophie Eriksson and Emma Beckman. I will leave the floor physically, really, concretely, I will leave the floor to Emma and Sophie, and I will come back when they're done.
So welcome, Sophie. Join us. So, fantastic. So we will do this together. It will be a little bit of a dialogue, and I know you will graduate very soon, more or less in a couple of weeks. isn't it?
Next year, actually, so we'll graduate in June.
But you will discuss your thesis in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Okay, and but this is the first presentation you do, so it's a kind of rehearsal of what will happen in a couple of weeks.
The final rehearsal.
So, are you emotion? A little bit. Okay.
It's good.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Me too. It doesn't matter. Even if you do this for 30 years, then there's always a little bit of energy around. So, what we will talk about? We will talk about innovation and design in the age of artificial intelligence. So I think we can start from a little bit of a quiz, just because we relax a bit and let people guess. So, and a little bit of a quiz that we wanted to start with to introduce the subject of our conversation is about the use of AI in creativity. What is more creative than painting? So, what you see here are 3 paintings. One of them is being painted by AI and done in 3D. So now we need to wait 15 seconds for people to guess where is this. Do you have plan for the future already? After graduation?
Oh, difficult question.
Difficult question.
Yeah.
You want to stay in Sweden or go abroad?
I think that I want to go abroad at some point. I don't know exactly at this moment. Maybe I will stay in Sweden for a couple of years, but at some point I want to live abroad for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Warmer places.
Yeah, maybe. But
It's not difficult because you can only go south from here.
But I love skiing, so I love the winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you?
Yeah,
Sophie?
no, I think I agree. But as the times are now, I think that for now I think it's Sweden. Maybe working digitally to somewhere else.
Interesting. So you have the best of both. So let me see if you start to have some answer here about what is the Rembrandt painting. So what is the poll saying?
So 46% said painting 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you see it?
I see it in the chat.
Okay, so you can tell the results. So fantastic. So 46% painting 1, and 2 and 3?
The rest, I don't know. We just have the 46% for painting 1.
So actually, they got it right. They got it right. Number 1 is the painting done by AI. I have to say it's quite impressive. It's probably the best one of the 3. So AI beats Rembrandt 1-0. So, and the second quiz is which one of these chairs has been designed by AI? And this is an example actually that you found. The previous example comes from a book of Marco Giansiri that is competing in the age of artificial intelligence, and this one is that come from an example you found, and we will not tell yet which one
Don't
is.
say too much.
So, do you see the answers already?
No, not yet.
But
Okay,
this is a tricky one, so maybe
This is
people
a tricky
need
one. Yes,
some
actually,
more
I have to
time.
say that it wouldn't be easy. So, which one has been designed by AI? Okay. So, would AI choose colors or black and white? I don't know.
Preference of
I
style.
can say that the chair that's been designed by AI is a chair that has been designed with the purpose of use the least material, so to minimize material to sustain people. Okay, let me see. Number 2 is leading. Oh my God, this is it's not fair. This is it. Okay, number 2 has been designed by 58%. You got it right. You got it right. Then I want to know because I wouldn't have guessed that when number 2 is AI. So instead, which one of the same chairs has been designed by a very famous designer? And I will not tell the name, but one of these 3 chairs. So let's see. Let's go again to the poll and pick which one of these has been designed by a very famous designer. I can tell you that also the company that is producing this chair, which is called Cartel, is a famous Italian company, leader in design, doing things in material. So do you see anything yet on the poll? I need your help. Not yet.
No.
Neck to neck. Okay. So there's a neck to neck. Which one? So they are very close. Okay. So the designer and AI said 35% on number 1. Okay, and 3, and number 2, of course, is a little lower. So the reality is that the same chair that has been designed by AI has been designed by a famous designer who is Felix Stark. Fantastic. And he decided to use that. So it's a cooperation. So there is a duo. I'm doing research on pair in this period, and it's a duo. So it's Philip Stark and AI try to design things. Okay. What we will try to discuss today is what happens when automation enters the space of decision making. Okay, imagination and creativity. So we know that the AI entering this space, and it will probably change how the way we design. So we'll try to understand how it is. On the left, you see an article that I wrote with Marco Iansidi and Luca Vendaminelli. Marco is a professor in Harvard, and Luca is visiting doctoral students in Harvard. We published just in April. And to the right, you see your continuation of the study. Yeah. So as a thesis, you're further developing what we have been writing. Yes. Good. So we'll share something that combines both the things. So we will not talk about AI as the result of the process. We don't talk about how AI gets into products. We talk about AI as part of the process. So AI, how can you use AI in the process of designing to change the way the product are made? So it's really the way AI is used into innovation. Okay, and traditionally we know that we want to design. We need to use 3 basic principles. I'm not inventing anything special here. But basically, when we design, we have 3 principles. One is we need to be user-centered because, of course, we want products to be meaningful to people. So user-centered is the first principle. Adaptive, which means we need to imagine new possibilities. That's design and creativity. So we need to imagine new possibilities and new things. And third, iterative. What does it mean? That when you design, you try, then you go back, then you try, then you go back, and you iterate, and so on. So this is the 3 basic principles of design: being user-centered, creative, and iterative. How these 3 principles traditionally has been implemented in reality? When we needed to design products with humans, unfortunately, designing is very intensive activity. It's very difficult to automate. So. It's being a very intensive activity, something that takes a lot of investment, a lot of time. Basically, the way products were designed was like this. You design in a moment. You don't wait for a customer to come and say, hello, I would like a car, and you design the car. No. You need to design the car up front. It would take 5, 6 years, whatever. Then finally put it into production, and someone will use this car. Yes. When you want to have a new car, after 10 years, you redesign this car on the basis of the feedback you get from the use of the previous product, and then you design it. So it's a very, very rigid process, okay, which is not very suitable for meeting this principle. User-centered, there are a lot of limitations because you design a product that more or less is for a segment. It's not for a person. It's not user-centered. Creative is limited because the way you make products is so rigid that you have a plant with a lot of investment. So you need to do that car, and you cannot change it so much. You can adapt it a little bit. And iterative is not really iterative. You see that it's very linear. So traditionally, human-intensive design has not been really fitting with this principle. What happened with AI, we discovered that AI provides the capability to overcome these limits. So it will overcome limits in user-centeredness because of scale, limits in creativity because of scope, and limits in iteration because it has a strong capability to learn. So what we will do now, with your help, we will see a few examples of how the artificial intelligence help through these capabilities to remove limits in these 3 principles. Okay? So the first one, I give it to you. So it's about the first part, user-centeredness. What did you find?
So the first one is user-centeredness, and as we can see that companies have started to identify the great opportunities to see customer opinions and dialogues on digital platforms, that it can be a very useful source to know about customer insights and needs and so on. However, as you said, this is a very time and resource consuming activity for humans to do, basically. So Hive, an innovation management consulting company together with Baserdorf that owns brands as Nivea, have leveraged the potential of AI for understanding customer needs. And the goal was really to derive a set of key problem areas for the body care segment, which could be used for product development. So going through this large amount of content on forums can be can be very time consuming, and when it's a manual effort. However, now when they used an algorithm instead, it was much more efficient. So AI was actually used in 2 ways. So the first one was to really pinpoint what was a customer need in this large amount of content. So what was like a need and what was just normal talk about something else. And the other one was a cluster, the identified need into relevant areas, which could be used then to refine by the innovation team in product development. So this technique is somewhat common today, but however, Roberto, I know that you have a maybe more advanced example on how user-centeredness can look like.
Yeah, in a way, this is a little step, and there is a lot of data around. So in this case, artificial intelligence is a way to browse information that is around. A much more advanced example of using artificial intelligence for being user-centered is what probably is very popular is Netflix. What you see here is a classic screenshot of Netflix, and in reality this screenshot has been designed every time you access Netflix. It's designed in the specific moment in which you access it, because the way I see the screen is not simply that it's presenting me different movies. Of course everyone is exposed to different movies, but even the cover of the movie that you see here is different from people to people. For example, down here you see there is a movie of Troy, and maybe because I love battles and strong guys, you see Achilles there, very angry, but maybe if you like typically love movies or other things, they can show you Troy, but in that case you see the scene of the last part in which Hector and Andromache say goodbye to each other because he needs to stay and defend the city. And so even the same movie has different covers depending on the person. So it's really designed in the moment for each single individual user. So this is the extreme level of user-centeredness. So what we learn is that the AI enables to create solutions that are designed for each individual person. So there's no segments anymore. Every person gets the specific solution based on their own data, not on the data of someone else. It's not that you do user analysis on the data of people using cars in the past. It's really how I use the product, and it's designed in the moment on the fly. Okay, so we see that with artificial intelligence, this would be impossible to be done with a human, of course. You cannot scan every movie and ask every person. This is only possible because of artificial intelligence. The second limit that is removed is about creativity. Can AI make us more creative? Let's see a couple of examples.
Yes. So we know that, as you said, like AI and creativity is a heavily discussed topic. And in this example, we will see how AI can alter the rules of brainstorming. So this is an example from the famous design agency IDEO. And they have tested a tool from OpenAI and GPT-3 called GPT-3. And what they do, Roberto, if you would like to show us the next slide, is that they ask this question to the machine. So basically, how might we help young people turn saving money into a lifelong habit? And then they also feed this algorithm with some suggestive answers. And after a while, this model starts to generate some ideas. So what we see here on the slide now is 4 different ideas generated from the AI. And what is really interesting about this is that they are so similar to something that Emma or you would come up with when brainstorming.
This is very interesting because it's an example that IDEO uses, an historical example. They did an innovation for Bank of America. So, and this is the same idea that came out when they did in humans. So in a way, it's that to say nothing new, but at least if you're alone, you're competing with a big team of 50 people. So it's still good, interesting.
Okay. So we have some more like crazy ideas that the AI came up with as suggestions on the slide that you see now. So this example really illustrates the possibilities to use AI to generate ideas. And in our study, we describe this as AI having the possibility to augment the creativity.
Having clowns jumping out of ATM machine, that's a little bit crazy, but that's the purpose. You want to stimulate the machine to create something. So what we see here is that was a very simple example. You find also something more advanced.
Yeah. We have a more advanced example from Mckinsey. It's a company that has taken the innovation task and basically use AI to do it. So something that normally would require superhuman abilities is now done with the support of AI. So these algorithms facilitate them to reduce the conventional search time from like weeks to seconds. So they collect data from patents, different technological publications and press and market data, and then they collect everything in their innovation database, which is what you see on the slide here. But what is really interesting is that they then generate insights from all this structured data using machine learning algorithms. So this lets the innovation team explore both related but also see unrelated technological fields where they can find inspiration and answers to both problems and solution questions that they are confronted with.
So in a way, this is very similar to the example we saw on Nivea, but this was on user needs. So instead of having people going around and explore for needs, it's the machine that goes around in the web. And in this case, instead of having engineers going around and searching for patents, you have the machine going around and searching for patents. So very, very, very interesting. So what we see is that in reality, you expand the possibility of creativity because you move around. Actually, you see that example was about cars and automotive, and you see that it's connecting to other industries. So it's moving the scope of creativity and expanding the possibilities. So, and then the last thing is iteration. Now, we know that when we design, we want to iterate, but there is a limit because it takes time to try and retry and retry. So how can AI help this iteration and remove the limitation of learning?
Exactly. I think you need to change slide, but...
You didn't see the slide?
No.
No problem.
Now I see it.
Ah, it was there.
So this is a seemingly simple example called Sketch and Code from Microsoft, but still very exciting. So this can enhance the iteration around prototyping. So we know that visual communication, prototyping is a very important factor in innovation. And in this Sketch to Code, you can just do a handwritten sketch, and then you upload this to the platform, and it can be translated into an HTML code in just a few seconds. So therefore, the innovation practitioner could walk out from the brainstorming session, for example, with a very simple first idea of a prototype. So that will enhance the iterations, and you can learn very fast.
Good. So also in this case, we have a more advanced case. The case is from Tesla. In this case, iteration even goes into the life cycle of the product. So many people don't know, but Tesla when it was released, this is Model 3, when it was released, it had a camera pointing inside the body of the car to the passengers. At the beginning was not, actually, I think still now it's still not used fully, but it still started to collect data about people inside. And what Tesla will do, over time, it will release new features that will use that camera that they were not released at the beginning. So you learn how people do things, collect data, and then you improve the product, even when it's already on the market. And this is a very interesting example because we used to think about this for digital product, but this is a physical product, it's a car. So you can really make iterations continuously. And so AI is really capable of bringing learning all over the game. So it's really learning never ends in this case. You don't learn only during development. You continue to learn also using real usage of the product. So this is what we learn. And we also learned that in reality, AI not only changes the capabilities of the principle and reinforces the principle of design. It makes it possible, removes some limit. But they also require new capabilities. What did you find there?
Yeah, if you change slide, I can talk about it. During our study, I think we had a realization that it seems like integrating AI into the innovation process have effect besides the innovation process itself, so like how the company is actually developing capabilities. So what I want to bring up is two examples that we found in our study. And the first one is that AI can facilitate change in power structure. So as illustrated on the quote that you can see, that we actually got from one of the interviews. So before, maybe people that screamed the loudest had the final say in which ideas were executed on. But now more AI literate team members are put in a very prominent position. So based on knowledge and the ability they have to visualize customer behavior identified by algorithm, it will circumvent taking decisions on maybe a managerial gut feeling or just like the person with the most power taking decision. So people with the ability to make this complex relation seem very simple will be regarded as very influential in this new type of organization.
Yeah.
And the other example I want to bring up is about the human-machine interaction. And when working with AI, it can reconfigure your whole organization. So as stated in the other quote that you see here, AI can actually be synonymous with asking another colleague. So our interviews describe sometimes that AI could be seen as a new team member to the innovation team. And when you define team members as people that are part of the innovation process, they share the workload, they can trigger creativity and get you bring new perspectives to your own thinking. This is qualities that are somewhat similar to what you can see that AI can do. And when you think about it in this way, AI maybe should be considered a new team member.
Yeah,
or what do you think, Sophie? Yeah.
It's very I have, you inspire me something. I don't know if you see this slide there. You see a new slide? Okay.
Yes.
And you inspire me something. I was imagining this AI team member. And I was saying, what kind of face does this new team member have? So have you ever seen AI around? Can you imagine an AI sitting here on the table? So this is the question for people at home. And the question is, post an image of that shows the face of AI. Because we never saw it around. But now we have a new team member. And you cannot do it on the poll here, but you can do it on our Twitter, hashtag Garden Dialogue. So start posting faces or images of AI. And so if we see it around, we can recognize it. Okay, what you see here, and I ask for your confirmation. So you see here is how Steven Spielberg imagined AI.
No.
I need to restart again. Okay. And Steven Spielberg imagined AI with the face of a child. Okay. And you see here the famous movie Artificial Intelligence, which is probably in a way, I don't know if we could never imagine to have a child as a team member, but it is. So, summary. The summary is, what is the scenario that we can see about innovation and AI? So, first of all, the first scenario we can see is that, okay, there is a process there. The process is still the same, but we can use data to what I call the data-driven innovation. So we have a lot of data analytics, and we can use this data to understand better the user, understand better ideas around, and so on. There's no real artificial intelligence. There's no automation of thinking there, but there is more using information to crawl around. Next slide is that what I call granular AI. Okay, I will go back here. Granular AI is what we see in the simpler example that we showed. What is granular AI? It's the use of AI in specific tasks of the innovation process. Sophie and Emma have been explore and map this different example. You see here the double diamond with all possible cases that you've been exploring. In all these cases, like the IDEO brainstorming, it's just a little task. You don't change completely the process. The process is still the same. Okay, so this is the scenario. Data-driven innovation, not really artificial intelligence. I would say popular in the 2010 when there was a lot of data analytics. Now we start seeing artificial intelligence used in specific tasks. But what is more interesting is the use of AI to reframe completely the way we design product. What you see here is that designing happens in two streams. There is what we call problem-solving loop. It's like the example of Netflix. You have the machine that take all the data, how you use Netflix, collect the data, an algorithm understand that you love movies or other kind of movie, and it propose you a solution of the screen. Okay, so these problem-solving loops are loops that design the product in the moment, and so all the boring task of design is totally left to the artificial intelligence. And then what the designers do, the designers simply reflect on, okay, but what is really meaning? What do we want to offer people that it makes sense? So this completely changes the paradigm of innovation and design. It's not what changes here is not the simply we apply design, artificial intelligence to the same process. It's a totally different way of designing. And we see two issues here. The first one is how do you design these problem-solving loops? Okay, which is something very complicated because it's not designers who design this; it's algorithm. And the last one, which is what opens up to the next phases, is what is left to humans. And to humans, what is left is what we call sense-making. I hope you see it there. You see it there?
Yes.
There's sense-making. Okay. So, which means what problems are worth being addressed. And sense making basically is two things. One is understanding better what you see, reframing. And it's totally different to understand what you want to understand and reframing what you want to see. It's two different things. So AI is very good in understanding. But reframing, which means not use the past, but imagine a new future, design a new problem, is something that AI cannot imagine. And the second thing is, while AI is very good to understand what people desires, what people want, this doesn't mean that it's really what we want to design. We don't want to give people simply what they want. We want to give them something more meaningful for us, for people, for society. So sense making is about meaningfulness, it's about purpose. And this is what we will explore in the rest of this presentation and this day. Reframing and meaningfulness. Sorry if this took a little bit longer for all this mess. We thank you very much. It's been exhausting with all these things. So, and now we are ready to move to the next speaker. Do you want to stay with me here and we can introduce the next one?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So the next speaker is, we are all ready, everything fine? Okay, so fantastic. So the next speaker is Malin Orebäck, probably in Sweden. Sorry, Malin is leading Mckinsey Design and is the leader.
We actually have one question.
Yeah, we have one question. So we have time for a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. I'm here. So Ramin, I'm interested to understand, when you say AI, what do you mean specifically machine learning or a broader use of the discipline? So this is exactly what is behind this last slide that you see in this moment. A broader use of a discipline is what you see to the left, using data analytics, so everything that is connected to analyzing data and so on. What you see to the right is more machine learning. It's really the automation of this cycle. This problem-solving loop is machine learning. It's the machine is training itself as in the same moment in which design. So there is an automation decision of the design process. So to the left, decisions are still made by humans. To the right, in the problem-solving loop, decisions are made by the machine.
But still on the granular AI, it can still be like machine learning.
There can be machine learning, exactly, in specific tasks that were you.
Yeah, I think that most of our examples actually include machine learning as the application of AI.
Good, good. So, are we ready for the guest? Ready for the guest. Okay, so we will talk about these two implications that are very, very important, because if design is becoming sense making and not problem solving, not only problem solving, we have this situation. One is, how do you reframe what we see, because machines are not capable of doing this. And second is, how do we drive innovation to a more meaningful future? How do we design a better future? So, and to address especially the second issue, we have a guest from Mckinsey Design, is Malin Orebäck, and is the leader of sustainability and circular economy for McKinsey. She's a very experienced design leader, more than 25 years of experience in this, and is a member of the McKinsey Design leadership team. So, Malin, welcome. I will leave the floor, so I will disconnect my slide and we'll let you get in. And meanwhile, if we don't have a chance to interact again, thank you very much. You've been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Malin. I'm super excited to be here with you today. I'm with Mckinsey Design. And as many of you may know McKinsey as a consultancy, or some of you may know, what most of you probably don't know is McKinsey is also now one of the world's biggest design agencies, with around 450 designers across the world operating in different design practices. So I lead sustainability within our design practice, and that means working with services, products, and also innovating new business models as well. And I am here today to talk to you about purpose, and purpose as a driver for innovation and change in our transition towards a much more sustainable and resilient society. So I'll take you through a few stories here today. So apologies in advance, because I will start this talk a little bit on the negative side, but I promise you I will end up on the positive note, so bear with me for a moment. But as somebody who's been working in sustainability for a long time, I've obviously spent a lot of time reading some of the texts and literature about where the world is heading. And it's quite easy to get a dark worldview. Some of this literature is quite dystopian on where the world is going. I'm sure you might have seen some of these titles yourselves. And of course, there's reason to be alarmed and worried. And I think all of us here are aware of the situation we're in. We have a situation of climate change that is unlike something that we have ever seen before. So McKinsey released a big report in the beginning of this year on climate risk. And this was really the big topic in Davos, and it was on everybody's lips. And we sort of foresee this as the big year where sustainability would really be the top topic on all CEO agendas. But then obviously this year turned into something else, as we all know. But just wanted to share with you a few curves. We're going to look a bit at curves here. So what you see here is the curve of CO2 in the atmosphere over the past thousands of years. So you can see that historically the level of CO2 in the atmosphere have gone up and down. Typically when it goes up, it goes really, really steeply up. And then typically it takes many, many thousands of years for it to come down again. And then, you know, in the end of this spectrum, we reached the flat period of the curve, which actually really where the Earth have been habitable and a good place for us as people to build our society in. And as the orange peak goes up in the end, that's really where we are now. So we are in a zone where we don't really know how this will affect us in a place that we haven't been in before. So we've all seen these curves, these types of curves. This is a little bit more closer view on that CO2 emissions curve. We see other types of curve, they're all accelerating. It comes to energy use, when it comes to waste in nature, these curves are going in an alarming direction. And really what we need to do is to sort of flip that curve around and say that we need to have a decision curve that looks something like this. We need to make all the really big decisions now, as soon as possible. And we need to act really decisively in the next decade, because these decisions that we make now will make a big impact on the future for all of us. And the longer we wait, the more limited will the effects be of these decisions. So, can we do it? Of course we can. So if we look at what happened this year with the situation with COVID, I mean, it's been a really, really strange and in many ways remarkable year, but it has also shown us the capability that we have. We have the capability to adapt really, really quickly, like we have never done before. And in ways that many of us would not have expected to do. I mean, this whole situation that we're in now, for example, is something new that we didn't really practice before. It has also set in motion some deep changes in industries. Think fossil industry, for example, that would likely never return to where they were. So some of these things are really driving us in the right direction. And before we sort of move into the examples, I just wanted to pause a bit on a quote that I really like from Hans Rosling, because what actually happens to us as humans when we're overwhelmed with all this negative information. So I just sort of took you through some of it, so you have this feeling now. You know, what is it that you feel now? I mean, we feel all overwhelmed with this negativity. And typically what we can do as humans is either we can despair or we can roll up our sleeves and try to do something about it and make it our purpose to do something about it. But typically as humans, we get negatively biased. With all the negative information we hear, we over-index on the negative, and we think that it's worse than it really is. And this is what Hans Rosling spent his life to try to prove, that it's actually the world is in a better place. So he did lots of research, but for example, he was asking people, to guess the status of child mortality or the education level of children amongst around the world. And what he found was that chimpanzees get these answers right about 50% of the time, whereas humans get these questions right about 30% of the time, because we are negatively biased. We think that everything is worse than it really is. So I think that this part of being a possibilist, is something that is about trying purposefully to resist this overdramatic worldview and really sort of think that you can actually do something about it. So my worldview is more something like this. It's more something around thinking that actually the world is not binary. It's not either black or white. It's not that we have a complete success or that we have a devastating misery in the end. It's actually the fact that every little thing that we do matters. And that is really where sort of purpose comes into play. It's what makes me go to work every morning and roll up my sleeve to do something, because I know that every little thing that I do to sort of change this curve is actually matter, and it matters a lot. So the answer to part of this is actually spelling regenerative. And how can we create a world that's much more regenerative by nature, where we actually use our resources in a smart way, in a circular way, where we don't deplete nature, but we'd rather regenerate the resources and re-energize nature instead. So what I will do now, I'll take you through a few inspiring examples of organizations and people who have integrated their own purpose of saving the planet or doing something about it into their corporate missions, and how that serves as a driver for actually new forms of innovation. And the first example here is Adidas. And Adidas realized that that the amount of plastics that actually end up in landfills and eventually might end up in oceans is enormous. And actually, to give you a bit of flavor of the dimension here of how big this problem is that we've done some work on this, and we made some calculations actually on the capability and the capacity of the waste management systems of the world. And most countries actually don't have a functioning waste management system like we do here in Sweden, for example. We don't have a lot of waste that ends up in nature because it's taken care of in a system. But most countries don't have that if you look on the global scale. So if we, on a global scale, were to build out a system that could serve all people on Earth with a functioning waste management system to take care of things so that it didn't end up in nature, we would have to add a staggering 400,000 people per day to that waste management system every day until 2040. So for 40 years, every day, we would need to add 400,000 people to a waste management system. I'm just going to pause there for a while. It's quite a crazy number. So that's how big the problem is. And the answer is really not necessarily building out the waste management system. The answer is reducing waste, building out waste, and taking out plastic waste from our systems in the first place. So this is what Adidas wants to do. They started by looking at, can we make shoes from recycled materials? So they started to manufacture shoes that made of recycled plastics. They made it from ocean plastic, they made it from other plastic, and they proved that you can make shoes from recycled plastic. But really that doesn't take away the fact that, there is still, if we take out plastics from the ocean, we're still not stopping the flow of plastic into the ocean. So the next step for them was to really look at, can we take the shoes back afterwards people have used them, so they don't end up in the ocean in the first place. Excuse me. So can we make a circular loop? So now they've made a new type of shoe that you actually can grind it down, and you can use. It's made of one single plastic material, so you can shred it, and then you can use the pellets that comes from the shoe to actually make a new shoe. So that's where the circularity comes in, and then you have the challenge to really get all the old shoes back, so you can put them into a new resource. The next step, which is being worked on now, is to take this toward a regenerative loop, because what happens if a shoe would end up in landfill anyway, or would end up in nature? If it would be a regenerative material or biodegradable, it could actually still be taken care of in nature. A lot of this technology is still in the works, so there's still a long way to go. But what's inspiring here is to see that hundreds of people within Adidas have been working for years to try to move in this direction. So another example is Patagonia. We all sort of know of Patagonia, obviously, as a purpose-driven and values-driven company, started by passionate climbers and surfers, and they were committed to build business based on using resources in a respectful way in the first place. And they've had this idea of treating materials with respect and build garments that really sort of wear with style. And now they've launched this platform with worn wear, with secondhand. And by doing that, driving a behavior change towards reuse and towards thinking that reuse and valuing reuse in a different way than before. So, and this is a pattern we see. A lot of big fashion brands are now experimenting with take back, resale, rental models. And also this has created a new business opportunity for these online e-commerce and logistics platform companies that actually serve these brands behind. So behind Patagonia, there's Trove, who actually power this whole take back logistics platform. And the interesting thing is that these platform companies behind the fashion brands, they have a growth trajectory that's far bigger than the actual fashion brands themselves. So it's really a new business innovation in itself. Obviously, needless to say, IKEA is another good example of a company that set really, really bold ambitions and commitments to be fully circular by 2030, which is going to be a massive effort at scale, given their product portfolio size. But they are also taking this route of being very explorative and experimental with what they do. They are trying out lots of different things, like secondhand rental models, buyback, and different types of initiatives to try out what could work, and also beginning to design their products in a much more circular way. And really, what's nice to see how well it goes together also with the main mission of creating a better life for the many. So it's really no need to change the main mission. Another example here of something that really can push innovation is what Novo Nordisk and many other companies have done, is that they're setting science-based targets. So science-based targets is a platform where you can actually go in and register your commitments. And that helps you to also set the structure for what you're promising, what targets you set up, and for following up that you're actually making them. And what this has done, I was listening to the head of sustainability of Novo Nordisk a couple of weeks in a meeting, and she said what this means is that they set up a target to achieve something, and that makes them then need to work backwards. So what can we do to achieve this target? It made them turn every stone to see what can we reduce, what can we take away, where can we get out, down these numbers of emission connected to X, Y, Z. So it really serves as a driver to hit this target. And also when you communicate it openly, you obviously need to stand by your promises. Another example on the product side is this equipment for anesthesia. Just to say that you can also be very purposeful on the actual project level and design with intent. If you make that intent really clear at the start, you can achieve pretty significant environmental impact as well, or reduced environmental impact. So in this case, 97% of the plastics, of the parts, 97% of the parts, of all the parts in this machine is recyclable. And all the parts are made of single plastic materials. They're all marked and branded, so you can take it apart and recycle all components. There's no merged plastic, no sort of glues or anything that makes it more difficult to recycle. And it's actually a lot cheaper to manufacture as well. So you can have this win-win-win if you make it an effort from the get-go. And my final example, just to sort of also have this personal purpose story as one inspiration to end off with. I'm sure you all know of Ellen Macarthur, who set the world record of sailing around the world alone. And in those moments when she was on her boat, she knew that the only thing that would keep her alive would be being extremely resourceful with what she had on board. That was the only thing she could use. So she had this sort of transformation in herself that we need to be much more resourceful with what we do. And we, coming back from that, she founded Ellen MacArthur Foundation that now have made it an effort to really drive the circular economy globally, and she's building that network to bring her purpose also to others. So by that, I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening, and stay creative, and I'll be here for any questions.
Thank you, Molly, for this great inspiration. Let me ask you this question from Marine. What many companies struggle with is the fact that reuse and recycling is often not profitable and reduces sales. What route do you see to get out of this stalemate?
And I see the money is left, so she needs to rejoin again. So, but I think we saw a very interesting example of this combination of meaningfulness and desirability. So it was many examples that are meaningful and full of purpose. The trick is to see then what is the trade-off with desirability of people, which is the classic problem of sustainability. When I see the money is back. Fantastic.
And
I don't know if she heard your question before.
I can repeat that. And it's really in line with the comment you just made, this trade-off that exists between the societal sphere and the individual sphere. So the question from Marine was the fact that companies struggle because when they reuse recycled products, this may not be profitable and might actually reduce it. So how do you overcome this stalemate?
So I think it's often a myth to say that sustainability always have to be more expensive, or to find a sustainable solution is always adding cost. What we see is rather the opposite, that if you reduce material, if you reduce complexity, if you think creatively about something, you might actually improve sustainability. You might also improve the functionality and the features if you take it as an designing that with intent from the beginning.
So the notion of regenerative is this ability to find both end solutions that actually manage to overcome the trade-off.
So I mean, you always need to be aware of the trade-off, and then So this is also very different from industry to industry. But if you look at the packaging industry, for example, that generates huge amounts of waste, oftentimes, it's possible to do all these three things at the same time. Reduce costs, improve sustainability, and actually improve the customer value. Then some other times when it comes to like the Adidas example, you need to also make a leap of faith because some of these new technologies take more time to develop. But it may also open a completely new market for you. So it's also a part of more long-term innovation.
Thank you, Molly, for sharing these very valuable insights. It's time to move on. And our next speaker is Tommy Ukuri. We are very happy to have
Tommy and the company he works for, part of this conference. So Tommy works for Summa Equity, which is a private equity firm that invests in purpose-driven organizations. And within Summa Equity, Tommy is partner responsible for the healthcare investments, in particular the changing demographics theme. And Tommy has been working for Nordic Capital and for Morgan Stanley before joining Summa Equity. And Tommy is also an alumnus of this school, as he has a Master of Science from the Stockholm School of Economics.
There we go. So I work as an investor and for a company called Summa Equity. And we're a private equity firm, as has been said here in the introduction. Not an AI person, not a design person as such, right? So this is a bit of a different perspective, but I'll try to also anchor this into what's been talked about in this conference for clarity. So I'll bring forward a little bit of the capital markets perspective on purpose or sense making, as was the term used by Roberto earlier. And, I think Roberto mentioned something that is very much in line with how we think about the world. It was along the lines of imagine a new future. What does this mean for capital markets? What does this mean for investors? What does this mean for business leaders? And that's kind of the topic of this talk. And in that context, you can also think about design, innovation, and AI as part of the kind of the toolbox. Let's see if we can flip the slide. There we go. So first question is, does purpose mean anything for capital markets? I think in school we have all been taught, and I'm sure that you have been taught, that shareholder value is the primary objective of a corporation. So this talk about purpose and ESG, so environmental, social governance topics, does it mean anything for capital markets or not? And I would argue that yes, it does, and it has dramatically shifted over the last few years. So there are a few examples to just bring that forward so that you guys have some perspective of what it might mean, right? It means a lot of things. But on the left-hand side, EU regulations. So EU has agreed on a taxonomy, which is a unified system of classification for sustainable business activities. This is a massive thing in EU. So it's basically a framework for how you measure sustainability so that capital can move to the right places and from the wrong places, so to speak, of the economy. The ECB, the European Central Bank, actually is including climate change in its policy making these days because it's such a big risk to the economy. The EIB, which is the European Investment Bank, which is the world's largest multilateral lender, is calling itself the EU Climate Bank and is committed to providing €1 trillion of climate-related investment over the coming years. All of these things clearly have a massive impact on markets, right? If you look at the amount of money that's flowing into funds and asset managers that have an ESG-based strategy, it's an exponential increase, right, over the last few years. So it's dramatically shifting, right, the allocation of capital. An interesting perspective is BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset manager. There's a lot of things to be said here, but there's an interesting quote from their latest annual report, which says, "We're on the edge of a fundamental reshaping of finance. Sooner than most anticipate, there will be a significant reallocation of capital, and that means towards the topic of sustainability and creating a better world." The Business Roundtable in the US, which is the largest 500 corporations in the US last year, came out and said, finally, in my personal opinion, that shareholder value is no longer the only and primary objective of a corporation, need to actually serve the needs of all stakeholders, right? That's a dramatic shift in terms of theory, right? Because the theory, again, that we've all been taught over time is that shareholder value is the only thing that you should care about, right? So yes, markets are moving in this direction. Markets are taking this seriously. So this is becoming an important topic in the capital markets. Now, is it becoming a topic because it's sort of a feel-good factor, or is this actually a factor for returns and for money, right? And historically, I think people have thought about these things as it's something you do on the side. You have a CSR project, right? But that's no longer the case. So this is about returns, right? So that's how most investors think about it. There is a long conversation to be had on this, and I suggest you talk to your professors about this as well. But a few simple examples on this slide. So on the left-hand side, this is based on reports from Mckinsey, who have done quite a lot of work on this stuff, as you can hear also in the previous talk. So how does ESG actually link to value creation? Well, there's a number of ways here. And interestingly, in the bubbles at the bottom there, you can see this is from surveys conducted on this topic. So do investors basically think that ESG compromises returns, or is it sort of an enabler of returns, right? And over the last few years, we've seen a dramatic shift in the attitude to this. And nowadays, actually, the majority of investors think that this is important to create any returns. On the right-hand side here at the top, that's a chart from Harvard Business School who have done studies on this. And their conclusion is that listed companies that do this well overperform financially as compared to companies that don't. At the bottom of the slide there, this is a study on Norwegian markets, public markets, where you can see a massive overperformance of what's called ESG shares. So companies that address some of these challenges in society in a positive way, effectively as compared to the broader market, right? So yes, this is a money question. Yes, this is a returns question because the world is changing, right? And we need to think about these things as investors, as businesses, as leaders. So who are we? We are a private equity firm. We started this firm about 4.5, 5 years ago. We started it with a specific philosophy to address sort of kind of challenges in the world and invest into the businesses that actually make a contribution towards those challenges, sort of the firms that are part of the solution rather than the problem. We've raised a couple of funds and done a number of investments over this period of time. Now, this slide we've had since we started the firm and we first started talking to our investors, which are the pension funds and so on. So, we said at that time, 5 years ago, how are you going to invest money in this world if you're going to be at all comfortable that you make some returns for the next 10 years? We have stagnating financial growth in Western economies. We have huge debt loads. We solved the previous debt crisis with more debt effectively. We have climate change that's dramatically going to change society and economies. We have social inequalities, and we have an increasingly polarized political landscape, creating uncertainty for markets and investors. Well, our answer to these questions is that you need to align your investment philosophy or investment strategy with sort of where the world is going, right? So you need to have a world view. You need to align with where society wants to go, where consumers, regulators want to go, and so on. That might seem obvious, right? But it's less obvious than it seems in many ways. And these are sort of 6 topics or challenges that are fundamental for our business strategy. And basically, in a nutshell, we look for companies that provide solutions to these, right? So that's kind of how it starts. Now, we call this model of investing private equity 4.0. So what is that? So private equity has gone through an evolution, and we're in one investment class among many, right? So, but in the beginning, in the 80s, when this industry was born, it was a lot about financial engineering, effectively. Then private equity firms became increasingly sophisticated, working with or enabling better operations for their companies. There was a huge wave of institutionalization where private equity firms became more strategic in their approach, building companies, etc., becoming sophisticated in various types of business topics. And that's where all the big firms have gone over time. And our view is that if firms are going to be successful and create returns over the next 10 years or 20 years, right, we need to think about these things differently again, right? So back to my previous point, purpose is important here, and what are you trying to achieve? Where are we? Which topics are you going to invest into, and how do those relate to the world you live in, right? So in our model, we think about the SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals, as kind of a framework. I'll touch on that on the next slide, but have a framework for what the world needs and how you invest against those needs. You use ESG to reduce risk in your operations, and you need to work with your operation, and you need to make sure that these things are fundamentally aligned across the organization, from your purpose to your business objectives to your organizational elements and behaviors, in order to actually have a model that works. The Sustainable Development Goals, for those of you that don't know these are 17 goals for human development agreed on at the UN a number of years ago. This is basically the stuff that the world needs in order to be sustainable. If our societies are going to sustain over time, we need things like quality education and affordable and clean energy and life on land, etc. Right? So this is not a magic map, but it's a useful framework for thinking about where is society going, what do we need, and how can we rethink the future as compared to where we stand today, right? And this is a useful map for us, right? As an investor, what are the stuff we're going to invest into? Where are solutions that the world needs? And where do you find essentially growth? We, as a firm, invest into three themes. I'll be quick on this. They touch all of the topics in ESG, environmental, social, and governance topics. We invest in what we call resource efficiency, so business models that address resource scarcity in society. We invest into what we call changing demographics, that has to do with healthcare and things like that. We invest into tech from sort of a governance perspective, so tech that basically drives compliance, regulatory compliance, and things like that. And all of these attach in various ways to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, what does a private equity firm do? So just a few words here. So we collect capital from institutions such as pension funds across the world. Our job is to invest that money, own these companies for a number of years. I think the average holding period in private equity industry is something like 5 years. And then one day, our job is to also sell these companies, hopefully with a return to our investors. Now, when we think about our model and sort of call it a purpose-driven model for investing, right? It starts with investment. So here we make choices in the investment phase. What is it that we're going to invest into? And here it's important to have that worldview and a perspective about what the world needs and reimagining that future. So we only invest into businesses that we think fit that profile and have the ability to deliver on some of these things that society needs. So that's kind of the starting point. It's about selection. In the ownership phase, we are clearly responsible for the companies that we own. And we don't work in the companies operationally, but we work on the board, and our job is to help these companies, fulfill their promise and create the most amount of value. Now, value is an interesting term, right? It used to be shareholder value only, so maximize your profit, essentially. But we think about this a little bit differently. Maximize your impact on your stakeholder community. And through that, then you will also deliver great financial returns. So these things tend to go very much hand in hand, as I alluded to earlier when we looked at a little bit at the sort of research and the actual returns parameters that we see in the market. And we work with a lot of things, right, to help these companies on this journey. And I'm not going to go into a terrible amount of detail here because it is really a detailed exercise, but 4 key words in the middle of this slide here, in the green box saying sustainable growth platform. These companies, every company needs to work with its strategy, needs to work with execution. So how do you build an execution model that works? And how do you work with your organization? So organization is clearly the driving factor in what you do. AI can solve some of these things clearly, so it can be a combination. But essentially, you need an organization, an execution machine that delivers the results you want. And then resilience, in our view, is important. In this changing world, you need to be resilient, and in order to be a sustainable business. So these are some things we work with. And then some people ask, well, if you use purpose as a starting point for organization, is that just some sort of fancy thing you talk about and something that feels good when you're standing around the coffee machine? The point is that as a leader, you have, I think, an opportunity to really use this as a tool for value creation, right? And the simplest way to think about that is sort of an external perspective and an internal perspective. So things like strategy and resilience has to do with what does your environment look like, and how can you then use sort of purpose-driven, strategy as a tool to really drive value creation in that market. What are the opportunities you see, and how do you communicate and design your own processes to meet those needs out there in a more powerful way than your competitors? And then internal perspective would be a lot around the organization. How do we use purpose to build a stronger organization that basically delivers better results? There are many tangible ways of doing this. So this is not just something that sounds nice, but this is actually something you can work with in very concrete form. So I'll mention a few words here to make it perhaps a little bit clearer. So when we think about the strategy process in one of our companies on one of our boards, this is sort of how it goes. As a leader, you need to start by thinking about purpose. So I guess what Roberto mentioned earlier as sort of sense making, I think was the term used. So why are we here? Why are we here as an organization? What is the challenge that we're addressing? And why are we doing this? Right? That has a lot to do with your external context and your stakeholder needs, right? So your stakeholders have certain challenges and needs. How can we then address them? So this purpose gives you a perspective of what it is that you can achieve, and that has a lot to do with your value creation potential, right? So which are those needs? How can we design an offer to meet those needs? And that is a business opportunity, right? Based on that, you can set your business objectives, your targets, right, and create your plan effectively. And then it comes down to the organization and sort of your operational model for making this work, because without that, it's going to be hard, right? So, and it's really, really important to mention in this model that all of these things need to tie together. So everything that you talk about in purpose needs to lead directly down to your organizational design and organizational behaviors, right, in order to really make this a meaningful exercise. And that might sound difficult, but and it can be, but there are many good models for how you work with this to make it really live and make this a whole that basically delivers good results. And then in this model, we also ask our companies to, of course, report their financial results as any company would do, but also their impact KPIs effectively. And these things should go hand in hand. So if you design your business to solve certain challenges, create some value for society, and your stakeholders, customers, then you should also measure that. Are we doing that? And in what way is that leading to better financial results? Right. So as a leader, you have an opportunity, I think, to use this concept of purpose and this way of thinking about the future and reimagining a new future to really sort of ask yourself the right questions for your business. Why are we here? How can we create value in this environment, right? How can we be part of this society? And that's really important, right? And then there's a number of tools to get there, and AI can clearly be an aid in some of this stuff. But we think that leadership challenge of creating clarity around what it is that we want to achieve as a business, as a starting point, is a really important and powerful tool. So that's what I intended to say. I will stop there.
Tommy, do you hear me? Fantastic.
Actually, there is. I'm almost. I mean, one of the classic alibi of the community of innovation and design is that we we care for making products that are sustainable, but people high up in the top floor of the organization, they don't listen to us. They're driven by different drivers. But in this case, it's almost the other way around. You're pushing for that, and you're asking for that, and it means that for our community, there's no alibi anymore. It's not that everyone listen, of course, but there is a segment at least of people up there who is listening. Actually, they are searching for this. So we need to create this connection, and maybe this event is a fantastic opportunity to show what you are doing, which is a great job, really, to people in design, that there is people asking for this. And one of the questions that come from Anton is this connection between finance, which is number driven, okay, and then there are SDGs, and the SDGs unfortunately are less number driven. And I know this problem because in my work with the European Innovation Council, we are very close to, because we provide financing to startups and growing companies. So, and we wanted to stimulate this, and we are searching for KPIs. I see that you're talking to KPIs. So how do you connect the financial numbers with KPIs, and somehow it needs to be measurable in numbers, even if sustainability is difficult to measure in numbers?
Yeah, a good question, and it's a kind of a popular question. So, and it's a difficult one as well, because the reality is that the world is used to measuring financials, but the world isn't used to measuring impact KPIs, right? And what's happening now is that the world is going through a massive learning exercise. So the taxonomy that the EU is doing is part of this. There's a number of organizations around the world, especially in the US, that are trying to create sort of standardized frameworks for this. But there is still no one set of rules here that everybody follows. So it's a bit work in progress. What we are doing as an organization is we think about this from two perspectives. One is that each business needs to define, based on its purpose and its business strategy, right, an opportunity. What are the critical things that relate to my business, right, that are fundamentally inherent in what I'm going to offer the market, and how do I measure that? So if I'm, I don't know, an education business is actually learning, right? That can be hard to measure. So then you need to think about how can you get to some proxies about that. So I'm making up an intangible example. If you're a business that works with, let's say, renewable power, you might say saved CO2 for the world. That's pretty tangible. You can measure that. You can put a number on that. So the business perspective can be very different, and it can be more easy or more difficult, right, to measure these things. So that's kind of where it starts, and we want all of our businesses to measure and track and make that transparent and put that in their annual reports, and we'll put it on our website as well. Now, then the other perspective is more the resilience perspective. So we also help, and here we actually use AI. So this is an AI example. So we have a collaboration with an AI-based firm. They have a machine, basically a software machine that pulls out data from all the ERP systems, etc., from our companies, the whole portfolio every year, and measure out the externalities that we produce. And those externalities get reported, and then you have a possibility as a management team to improve on these every year, whether it's your CO2 or your various types of environmental footprints in your supply chain and stuff like that, right? So that we are doing. So that's kind of the externality perspective. And then we're having a collaboration with Harvard Business School that has something called IY, which is the world's first attempt of putting monetary value on every activity that you have, whether it's positive, right, or negative externalities, so to speak. So what value are you creating for society, and what value are you destroying for society? And this is actually being measured in numbers. And we're the world's first investment firm that is attempting to do this for the portfolio together with Harvard. So this is work in progress. It can be done. The methods will improve over time, and we've just kind of started on that journey.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We are running out of time, so we will move soon to the break. I was encouraged by one slide that you showed, the slide number 3. It was this study, I probably came from Harvard, in which you were showing the market value of companies investing in SDGs and more standard companies. And it was interesting to see how the value went down, of course, in 2008, 2009. And if you put the baseline, it looks like the companies who are investing in SDGs, in reality, they are losing more. But then when they restart much faster. So the hope is that it will happen again now. So if you baseline now and we are in the bottom, those that will restart much faster if they are more focused on SDGs. That's the hope. I don't know if you agree with that.
I would totally agree with that. And I think if you look at what's happened in this crisis, the pandemic, right? If you look at share prices, the sort of ESG friendly stocks, so to speak, have bounced back a lot better than other stocks effectively. So I think it's quite clear.
Fantastic. And we hope that we know the European Community or Union is helping this to drive. So it's a very good news. So thank you very much, Tommy. Thank you to all people from home. We will take a little bit of break, just 5 minutes, just to stretch a little bit, take a coffee. We need coffee in Sweden to keep us awake. So we reconnect in 5 minutes. Stay with us. There will be great guests, Linda from
talking about purpose, and then it will be the awards, and Matteo, of course, closing up with the presentation of your own research with the student.
Yes.
So see you soon.